I love how all these authors you mentioned, they kind of like straddle different genres, they're writing at different times, but there is just something so unifying almost in um, just their voices and their imagination and how they are writing our experiences into being. And I remember we published something on Black Ballad, and it was kind of talking about blackness as a technology, which was really like, it blew my mind at first. I was like what? What do you mean technology? But that blackness as a technology and how that feeds into kind of like Afrofuturism and that kind of thing. So I just want you to talk a bit about kind of like Afrofuturism, why you're drawn to it with your work as Black to the Future, and yeah, about blackness as a futuristic technology that we can all wield.
That's mind-blowing, what you just said, really, really incredible. Yeah, so for me it's interesting, like the speculative side and then the Afrofuturistic side, they kind of all feed into each other. And with Black to the Future, what happened was, I was again thinking about these influences, these sci-fi writers like Octavia Butler, like Samuel R. Delany, but also in music, Sun Ra, who was the king of Afrofuturism through music. And I really wanted to celebrate these voices, like the voices that we have now across different disciplines, just doing really exciting, interesting things. And I know that Afrofuturism is often looked at through the lens of science and technology, which is like its root, and sort of anchoring the Black perspective in the future. But I think it's really important to expand that. So for Black to the Future, it's about looking at the past, the present, and the future, because then we're really broadening it and centering a lot of those voices. So that's what I wanted to do with the festival, because there are so many incredible voices, but people aren't aware of them, or they're not aware of each other. So it's about, just nurturing and nourishing that sort of Black alternative space. And I kind of see it as an extension of like what I do with my writing. That that's what we want to keep doing. We want to keep expanding spaces. It's not just for us. We want to kind of open that up. So it's really been a privilege to be able to do that and, have people support the project and just kind of big up and amplify like incredible voices. Yeah.
I love what you said about it being like past, present and future, because one of the things I think really stands out for me in terms of like Black literature is just the way that the past is so much in the present. Even in Korondera, you have these kind of like two-time, I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but the way that these timelines interact and the fact that the past is not really the past, and we often talk about that in terms of like bad stuff that's kind of coming back to revisit us, but just in general I feel like it's a very kind of like Black African, Black Atlantic view of time where it's like almost like circular. And there's I've forgotten the specific ethnic group, but there's a specific ethnic group in Southern Africa that kind of talks about that we're actually approaching the past. Like the past isn't behind us, we're actually kind of like approaching it. So I forgot my question now because I'm geeking out over that. Let me revisit what my question is. Yeah, so I want to talk about just that in terms of your work, like myth and memory and history, and how you weave all of those kind of like the past, the present, the future into your work, because it's just so fascinating.
No, thank you. That's such a great question. Firstly, I'm really obsessed about African history because I think there is so much there that is empowering and incredible that we're not really getting to see. With my first novel, Butterfly Fish, I wrote about the Benin Kingdom, 18th century Kingdom of Benin. I reimagined that. So my family are from Benin, so I feel like there's a direct connection there. And when I was a kid, my father was always talking about the Benin Kingdom and how incredible it was, the artifacts, the culture, the fact that the architecture was insane for that time. And it kind of stayed with me. So during the periods where I really struggled, like in my teens and in my 20s, I was holding on to this history. And I'm really grateful to my father for that. What you said about approaching the part, that is uncanny. It's actually made the hairs on my arm stand up, because that's literally what I was doing with Butterfly Fish. I was like approaching the past. I was approaching 18th century Kingdom of Benin. Now, why didn't I write about modern Benin? something about that history really spoke to me. So I wanted to recreate that, but then also connect it with, you know, the modern timeline and what those characters were going through. So I'm very interested in the process of myth making. You know, how do you create myth? How do you shape it? How do you reimagine it in a way that speaks to people's current experiences, but also in a way that feels elusive, you know, where there's layers and layers and layers to it. So for Curandera, it was a slightly different challenge, because instead I'm writing about 17th century Cape Verde, Cabo Verde, and I had gone to Cape Verde with my sister in my 20s, and it was an amazing trip, and I wrote about it after the trip, but I knew I wanted to do something more with it. So later on, when I had the idea for this novel, and it was coming to me in fragments, you know, writing about Cape Verde, the spiritual element, the sort of naturalistic element, the way the landscape looked and spoke to me, it felt really, really important to incorporate all of that as part of the narrative and sort of, you know, part of the aesthetic of the work. And it's really interesting with writing, like there's only so much you can say, because you know how it is, there's a magic that occurs. It's almost like a transcendent space, and you're just lucky enough to be like the vessel to tell the story. So once I came up with the characters and I knew what the idea was, and I really sat with it, and I felt like I was carrying these worlds, you know, it was just about being in this space to tell their stories, you know, and let the voices speak for themselves. But yeah, this is the second book that I've sort of focused on, you know, African history and spiritualism and travel and multiple dimensions and, you know, wounds and the body as a portal, the body as like a regenerative space, the body as a transformative space, ideas around utopia and what that can look like and feel like, how you can create utopias for yourselves. So there's so much in the book, you know, I hope everyone picks up a copy, a little bit of marketing there, there's so much there. But yeah, essentially for me it's really exciting to be able to write about African histories and present it in a way that is like liberating and exciting and interesting, like not problematic, complex. You know, where of course you're presenting like the traumas and the pain, because otherwise that wouldn't be real life. But you're also presenting the beauty and the joy and the power of, you know, Black consciousness and Black spirituality, and the history behind it. And yeah, for me, it was just such a joy to kind of, try to play and incorporate all of those things. Sorry, that was a really long response.
No, this is what we're here for. We're here for the in-depth responses. No, thank you. I'm going to ask you for another reading, but after the reading, we're going to come to audience questions. So if you have them formulating, now's your chance to finalise them before we come to the questions. But yes, Irenosen's book, my book, will be on sale, and we'll be happy to sign copies for you as well. So, you know, don't miss out.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm just going to read a second excerpt from the Cape Verde timeline. I run until my limbs ache, and the murmurings of my kind, those women who will be pregnant with half-futures again, are reduced to shrunken tremors in my chest. I run till the burn from my body reaches the pinnacle, the epicenter of Oni's molten wanderings, like a series of blood vessels colouring a trail. I run till Kin's glassy curved hand in the restless sky reaches through several winters to hold me by the throat, steady me at intervals, mark my gaze with the splintered imprints of rebellious small clouds blooming in the blood, causing a series of organs to take flight while the body rests. I run till the bone in my pocket chafes my skin through the thin cloth in search of a soft, moist pink marrow, which has long disintegrated in me. I run all the way through spiky scratches of nestle, the loosened weight of rocks crumbling, tethered by the dampened ground. The lines of past nights darting through the mountains are parched, blackened veins. Moss crawling from several angles is new growth kissed by cold breath. The warm air on my skin stirring a distant fangled thing, making its way to me. I run towards the sea's embrace, glinting like a scowling blue jewel, liquefied in its undoing. It is dotted with boats. Boasting fishermen casting wide nets out to snag silvery fish they can eat now. I pause on the shore watching the boats. Salty sea air fills my nostrils. The boats rock gently on undulating waters. The boats are filled with weeping, hollowed bones, and then they are not. The boats are loaded with scores of locusts shaped like women's silhouettes, and then they are not. The boats are refuges for bloody lace dresses fluttering against the wood like a final request, a last interruption, and then they are not. A man is making his way towards me. The right side of his face is scarred like a prophet born from a searing flame. His gait sure, steady fingers curling into the net. His haul dripping onto the shore. The catch in his net is rapidly becoming more visible. His breath is a signal born from a slackened morning's mouth, waiting for the day's language. The waters become rough. The boats are unsteady instruments gods deposited in bouts of kindness to men of the land, who use their bare hands to build them in the quiet hours of the day. They rock, fragile fruit spawned from the flesh. Men call out to each other, steadily steering them, while the water shadows cling to the undersides one last time. The sprawling choppy jewels water folds, flattens, sways, then flattens again in gulps of breathing. The boats are moored, the lines of the shore pinned beneath them. The men hop out, push their boats further up the shore, arms straining in the light, their bodies covered in salty sea dew, shirts filled with damp patches. They grab their nets, hauls of fish bucking against various endings, loose and bright scales like small coloured seasons waiting to expand. The men convene briefly, the waters lapping at their feet, gaze as a fish abandon the nets. I inhale, a wind whips stray twigs searching for roots in the wrong land. The men scatter, I get down on my knees. The sand is cold, grainy bits of stone press against the bone. I push my tongue into the spots, inside the sand, into the small, malleable gap. I taste tears from a great loss, bleeding from an ankle wound, the collapse of a trap on shore of what it was supposed to catch. I look up, the tip of my tongue covered in sand, a pink newborn, yet to decide its outer layer. The man born from fire is closer now. I stand, a dusting of sand covering my knees. His legs are bowed, his skin is dark, his wavy dark hair curls away from his neck. His fish haul dribbles watery silver light from the corners of their mouths. He raises his hand, indicating I should wait. I close my mouth, fresh saliva removing grainy particles from my tongue. A fluttering inside me builds into a tension. The clipped wing of a smoke-shrouded gull and a dying fish's fin become one. The man drops the net between us. A duplicitous trail of smoke speaks into my lungs. His loose brown shirt is rolled up at the sleeves. His hair, somewhat unkempt, is streaked with gold from being out in the sun often. The right side of his face, scarred from fire, has tight, shinier skin. The left side is still handsome. A shadow of bristle is on his chin. His Adam's apple bobs up and down as though waiting to be plucked. He is of considerable height, looming, looking down at me with a curious expression. His eyes rest on my skin. He smells of sweat and the sea. This is a man with the ocean's waters pumping through his veins in an act of deliberate misdirection. The curl of white waves tempering his heartbeat, dampening the ferocity of flame-singed secrets. I'll stop there. That's thirsty work, really.
I know, incredible. So do we have any questions? Oh, one hand, I love proactive. I think you might have to shout and I'll repeat it.
Okay. Honestly, thank you so much for the conversation. It's really great to hear about writing, influences, and making. So, Irenosen, you write a lot about the experiences of Black people writing. As we mentioned in the conversation, the publishing industry is long and white. So my question is, have you ever received feedback from a non-Black person in
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Yeah, that happened quite early on. My then agent was submitting my work to publishers, so we sent to all the big guys. This was like 10 years ago. And we got feedback that some of them thought the work was strong, but the feedback was usually, we don't know what to do with this voice. We don't know how to market the voice, which was pretty disappointing. And then we had one particular feedback say that they didn't think I was writing about Black experiences in an authentic enough way, and that, I know the audacity, the actual goal, and that they thought the writing was too strange. So I really didn't know what to do with that feedback, and I remember being quite upset at the time, because you know how it is, you work really hard, draft after draft, and then you kind of like close your eyes and hope someone picks it up. So to get that feedback was really disappointing. But I sat with it for a bit, and then my response was, okay, this is actually just a lack of imagination on that individual's path. They don't understand the nuances of the Black experience, and actually, if they read widely enough, my writing would make absolute sense to them. Publishing professionals have the imagination to, champion or publish somebody like a Margaret Atwood, and I love Margaret Atwood's work, and she's been very supportive of me, but it's really interesting who is given, the credit and the space to be supported in a particular way. So that happened, and that was hard, and the way we overcame that was just to keep sending the work out. And then I was very lucky because Jacaranda Books, who is run by a Black woman, Valerie Brands, who's excellent. I met her at a party, and we were the only two Black people. It was a publishing party, and you do the nods, like, what's up? We did that from across the room, and then she came to speak to me, and she was just in the process of setting Jacaranda up, and she said, oh, what do you do, Bill? I said, I'm a writer. And she said, that's uncanny, I'm setting this publishing house up. Why don't you send me your stuff? And also, through the process of that conversation, I discovered that she went to school with my first writing mentor. So that was the universe saying something. And then I sent her the work. I didn't think anything of it. I forgot about it. And about a month later, she got back to me saying, I love these short stories. These stories are really, really interesting. And I love the novel too, but we'll publish the novel first. That classic thing of, let's build an audience for you with the novel. But yeah, my point is, I was lucky enough that there are independent spaces who do look for, Black voices and voices of colour and Black women, and kind of understand that these stories need to be told. Were it not for Valerie, I may not have been published. So I'm super grateful to her to this day. Off the back of her publishing me, I got picked up by her share. That would not have happened had Jacaranda not taken a risk, had a Black woman not seen the value in my writing and published me. So I was really lucky in that regard. But yeah, I think you kind of, how it is. You get feedback, it's tough. You sort of have to shake it off and really kind of still believe in your voice and what you have to offer. I always felt like there was a space for what I was doing, and even if there isn't, build the table, carve the space, you just have to be really determined to kind of make it happen, but also sort of find your advocates. I was really lucky that there were people behind the scenes who were supportive of my writing and would say, oh, you should talk to this person, or you should do this night, just finding ways to get the voice out there. So yeah, that's how I got around it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Shy, still.
We have a mic now. We have a mic.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for what you're doing. I grew up in the 60s and 70s and I never had anything like this. So I'm now getting my love for reading and writing. I remember at school the only good grade I ever got was in English literature and English language, To Kill a Mockingbird, Romeo and Juliet, etc. So now what I found is with my nephews, the question is, I'm struggling to get the next generation to understand the power of the pen. I'm struggling to get the next generation to read. Now, in Black Ballad, you recently gave us a list of 10 books for the young readers, which I've ordered every single one of them for my nephews. And what I find I have to do in the books is, in order to get them to read, I have to plant money in the book. I'm not kidding, that's the only thing. When they read a chapter and they'll find like a fiver or something, then they ring, I found money. Okay, what did you read before you found the money? So my question is, how do we motivate the next generation, especially the young boys who seem to be, young black boys who seem to be being left behind?
That's a really, really good question. It's so interesting because I started off working in performance poetry in London, so Apples and Snakes, and they kind of programmed poets doing live poetry and helping to develop those new voices. And it felt like there were a lot of exciting young black male voices coming through the spoken word scene. Like, we know that they often come through music or spoken word, and I thought that that was really interesting, that through that platform they would go on to do other things, you know, like write books or produce theatre plays. So Inua Ellams, who I think is programmed for the festival, I met Inua years ago through Apples and Snakes because we programmed him, because he's a poet, fantastic poet, but now also a playwright, and I think has written books as well. Lem Sisse, again another famous poet, has now written fiction and non-fiction. So I think through spaces like that, and also doing recommended reads and kind of initiatives to, you know, encourage our young boys and men to read, that's the way forward. So like maybe Black Ballad can do, you know, a pass this book on to the Men in Your Life initiative. I know the Women's Prize do something like that. I did something like that, you know, a couple of years ago. So there are things that we can do, and also just being active and like forceful in your own life. So I grew up being a really voracious reader, and I have two brothers. And because I always had my head in the book and the house was always loaded with books, they were curious about what I was doing and why I found books so fascinating, and they started reading. You know, so like now I have conversations with my brothers about what they're reading, what books they enjoy. And obviously because I'm a writer, you know, it's like, it's really nice to be able to do that. So I think there's nothing wrong with sharing books with men in your life, or saying, you know what, maybe you're going through this difficult period, this book really lifted me out of that. You know, there are some great black male authors, some great young voices, and I know that they're doing lots of sort of outreach work, going to schools. I think that's really important, so sending them out to schools, sending them to do workshops, festivals, all of that sort of grassroots work, I think helps to sort of amplify those voices and generate interest. So that's what I think. We need to keep doing what we're doing, you know, having festivals like this, doing amazing things, you know, programming incredible voices, you know, bring them along, you know, because if you do, then they discover like new voices and think, oh, I really like what that guy's doing. I want to get his book. I'm going to follow his career. That's a way to plant the seed, isn't it? So I think, yeah, it's sort of, it's an ongoing conversation, getting men to read books, and also getting men to read books by women. That's another conversation. But I think, you know, we have to keep, yeah, being active in that regard. So that's my response.
Yeah, I've got two boys, so it's very kind of like key for me as well. And just practically, kind of off the back of what Irenosen said, it's just making the books available. So in my house, until I got another book, like there were literally books falling on top of my kids. They were even to the point where sometimes when they'd sit to watch TV on the floor, they'll be sitting on a book, and a part of me is like, don't disrespect the book. But at the same time, it's just like normalizing that to them. So sometimes I have to put certain books out the way, so that's definitely not for you yet. But just kind of normalizing books in the home. When my son cleared one of my shelves to put his own books there again, I had to be like, this is good, but you've just mashed up my shelving pattern, it's fine. But yeah, it's just normalizing that, and also making books a kind of like point of conversation. So from a young age, they've read before bed, to the point where sometimes I'm like, just go to bed, and I'm like, no, we need to read. Okay, fine, let's read, let's do another 15 minutes. And it's also, as an adult, kind of allowing them to dictate that as well, and not trying to be like, oh no, we'll read tomorrow, or even like this type of books that they read. Like there's this whole thing about celebrity children's authors and whether they should have this space. But if you have someone like Marcus Rashford who's put his name on a book, if that's gonna get a little black boy to pick up a book, let that happen. Like, my son will pick up a book and start reading it, and I'll just be thinking, that is actually not my thing at all, but that's absolutely fine. Sometimes I feel like we can try and push our interests on, so, oh, I read this book as a child, you need to. No, let them read whatever, even if it doesn't interest you, just let them find that. So that's kind of the things that I've found. And another thing, sometimes they want to read the same book over and over again. I've got a 5-year-old. Every single day we're reading, what's it called? Young Jedi Adventures. But you know what? If it's going to keep him excited, then let's read it till the book falls apart. And then we'll find the next one. So it's kind of just giving them the space to just find their thing. And however they can just normalize that in their life, just let them do it. It's like, yeah, they'll find their interest. It's just giving them that, the access to whatever books are available to them. I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to ask for one more question. One more. Oh, you guys are very timely. Thank you. So please, let's have a round of applause for Irenosen. And a round of applause for Jendella for staying with the beautiful conversation. Thank you all for being an amazing audience. As I mentioned, our books are outside on sale on the mezzanine. We'll be there to sign as well. But other than that, please stick around for an amazing, amazing program for this afternoon, and stay safe.
And a happy birthday to Black Ballad as well. Like, the work that you've been doing for 10 years is incredible. Thank you both to Jendella and Irenosen. Please do buy their books. They're both sticking around for signings. This afternoon we've got, at 3:15, we've got Black Imaginations with Echo Eshen, Dean Atta, Mame Blue and many others. Then later on we've got a keynote with Victoria as a Quay Bully. And then this evening at 7:30, we've got Inua Elms's Rap Party, which is going to be incredible. If you wanted to stick around and you don't have a ticket yet, just let box office know, because we are doing a special ticket for people who've got day passes. And then finally, I'd like to do a really big thank you to our signers so far today. So that's Debbie and Lorraine. And also a deep thanks to DeafFest, who've helped us to create these incredible curtain railers. And thank you to the first one of today, which is DJ Inigo, who's here. Thanks everyone, we'll see you back here at 3:15.